Can I welcome you first of all to this event. We see this event as more of a discussion, but people are going to come to the front and talk about the projects they've either done or the projects they're intending to do. And a way of exchanging ideas, it seems to be really, really important. But I just want to say a few words about the centre, and then also to talk briefly about legacy and to show a few images that I think are important to make us think about legacy. There are 5 centres. They're funded by the Art and Humanities Research Council. This is ours, Voices of War and Peace, and it has a very good website where we put lots of stuff on. So if you're doing an activity or you've got anything you want to say, we can put it on that website. Eventually, that website will migrate to the British Library in 2019, as will all the other websites. We've also got Mike here from Nottingham, who's going to say a few words as well about his centre. So I just wanted to talk a bit about the idea of legacy, to think about the context in which we found black soldiers actually on the Western Front. And I think one of the things you can talk about legacy, it's the legacy of empire. I think people forget sometimes there's a lot of stuff going on before the First World War. So for example, this image here is of Sergeant William Gordon, born in Jamaica, enlisted in the West India Regiment in 1885. He won the VC in Sierra Leone in 1892, and he was discharged in 1902. So it's very important, I think, to see that there's a legacy of empire that is driving in some ways the later involvement with the First World War. But another legacy of empire that was widespread across Europe at the same time, not far off 1902, for example, is this obsession that Europeans had for the exotic. And what you find at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, is this fascination with the idea of the human zoo. So you find in Europe and in the UK, people were put on display as a way of the exotic being put across to distinguish between the European white race and then also the black races in that sense. This one's from 1906 in Marseille. This is another colonial exhibition from 1907 in Paris. And I think what's so interesting here is to have the image of the VC winner actually fighting for empire, and then the kind of exploitation of cultural difference that's happening in these images here. Now, recruitment to fight for the mother country brought volunteers from the Caribbean to the UK in 1915 as part of the British West Indies Regiment. We have a recruitment poster here, and we have this quite well-known image of black soldiers from the regiment actually in Europe. But we also know that there were black volunteers from local communities, such as this one, which is Small Heath Home Defence Corps in 1917. So there's people who are coming from the colonies into Europe, but at the same time there are people actually born in the UK from local communities who also enlisted. I think another legacy of empire is that the conflict attracted worldwide engagement. This is an image from the New York Times, published in 1919. It's called The War of the Races. And I think in itself it also constitutes a legacy in terms of how the war was understood. It was a war about race in some ways. We also find lots of individual representations of those who participated from different nations in the First World War. So, for example, this is a French Senegalese soldier with his trophies. He's holding those helmets of people who actually he's been in conflict with. I think it's important, though, when we see celebratory images like this, that they're put alongside the reality of the conflict. So this is an image here from April 1915, a black soldier dying in the very first gas attack. So it's balancing those two agendas, I think, is very important. I think also we need to be conscious of the way in which legacy also shaped propaganda. There's a very, very famous medal that was produced by Germany after the occupation, this one here, which draws on, I think, all those racist ideas from the 19th century. This medal was distributed across Germany. It's called Black Shame, and it's meant to be the accusations about rape that was levelled at black soldiers who were occupying the Rhineland. So legacy is also the ideas carrying through, which I think are really important to remember. Those soldiers who were captured in battle were housed in camps, and those camps varied the quality of the camps on the nature of the people who were in them. So if you were British or French in a camp, you had a better standard of camp. If you were black or a Slav, the Slavs were seen as the lowest of the low by the Germans. You had a very different experience in terms of the camps you were put in. What's also interesting is they took photographs of people in the camps and used them to talk about characteristics of those people. It became another form of the human zoo. We also know that at the end of the war, battle tourism starts to happen. People start to go to the battlegrounds to see what's going on. And we can see here, this is 1919, we've got a decorated war widow, and she's posing with a soldier, which I believe is from the British West Indies Regiment. We also know that the end of the war saw a shift from the 1920s, from commemoration to the issue of remembrance. And that remembrance issue also gets picked up in Britain's colonies. So it's not unusual in Africa, in villages, to see villagers being encouraged to wear a Flanders poppy on the 11th of November. And that's another legacy carrying through. We do know that in 1917 a book was published by Harry Johnston, which was called The Black Man's Part in the Great War. And that book was actually commemorating the contribution of black soldiers to the First World War. But what also happens, come the 1920s and 30s, is there's a forgetting of the involvement of black soldiers in the First World War. But what does continue to circulate are those racist myths through the period after the First World War. So, for example, there's a very famous essay by George Orwell on the stereotypes of foreigners to be found in boys' weeklies. This is a 1939 essay. I won't read it out, but you can see for yourselves, this idea of stereotypes is very strong. It's carrying through the whole period. Go on one further. This is an extract from a geography textbook used in lots of schools in the 1930s. And it's like a textbook which has a boy travelling with his uncle in an aeroplane travelling around the world. And you can see in here these very negative stereotypes continuing through. And my final image brings this full circle. This is Brussels in 1958, another human zoo. There's a little girl there, African girl, who's been fed a banana by someone in the crowd. And I think what this is really important is that everyone in this room realises the importance of telling the story of the black involvement in the First World War. But it has to be contextualised, I think, in terms of the very fact that other things are continuing through this period. And one of the dangers of the commemoration agenda, I think, is we kind of airbrush out these other bits of legacy which are central to our understanding of context in which we should be doing commemoration. I just thought it was useful to kind of get that idea of legacy, because we want to critically engage with the commemoration, not just simply tell good stories. I just thought it's a useful way of contextualising today's discussion.